So the next move I'm going to cover is the hinge. People call it Romanian deadlift or straight leg deadlift. So I'm going to grab a dowel. So if you end up, the best way to teach yourself this is to grab like a PVC pipe or any type of a straight rod, could be like a broomstick. And what we're going to work on is you'll see people doing their deadlifts where they're driving back, keeping the legs pretty straight. If we're doing a deadlift from the ground, we're just getting a little bit more knee flexion, but we're going to be dropping down. You're still going to be working on that hinge. Unlike the squat pattern, when the squat pattern, the chest is staying much more upright, so a lot more knee flexion. Here we're getting a big hip hinge, so a lot of flexion happening at the hip. Biggest problem we have is when people end up bending in their lower back as opposed to in their hip. So a very simple strategy for doing that is getting that dowel, touching the sacrum or your tailbone, touching your mid-back, touching your head. If it's light enough, you can hold it with one hand. If you have the shoulder range of motion, you can hold it with two hands. But we're going to work on getting that hip drive. So we're leading with our tailbone going backwards. So like if you're against the wall, you're reaching back towards, so we're getting a little bit of shift onto the heels as we drop our chest to counterbalance. And we just have a subtle knee flexion. So it could be a little bit greater than that, could be a little bit less than that. You're going to have a different feel on the back side, but typically we're just going to have a subtle knee bend, driving our hip back. And if you're doing this wrong, if you're not keeping neutral spine, so broad shoulders, abs are engaged, we're dropping down. If you're starting to flex in your spine, you're going to feel this pull right off your tailbone. So it's going to give you immediate feedback if you're doing this incorrectly. So it's always a good idea to just even warm up with a couple of these, 3 or 4 of those. You can switch your arm action, or you can just do one arm, kind of drive back, work into the pattern before you grab dumbbells or a weight, and you start cranking away, and then kind of going into what I call that turtle shell. So I always tell people to break the turtle shell, lead with the hips, drive in, pop back up. So another point with that is typically when we're doing these, we're going to get a little bit more narrow with our base. You could do those a little wider if you were doing that for a specific reason, but neutral setup for most people is going to be just under the hips with these moves. And then we're driving into that hinge pattern and popping back up. So if you were doing that same thing in a single leg stance, so you're reaching out, kind of turn that hip down, and then pop back up. You could be holding dumbbells or something hanging there, but before you ever go into that, you want to make sure you can hold that position while going down into that single leg hinge position. So if we have this going on, you're just going to be doing a lot of damage to your lower back, rep after rep, week after week, until you have a back problem. You're probably going to go pick something up outside, even a pencil for that matter, and you think, oh, I just threw my back out. You didn't just throw your back out. You did a lot of poor movements in the gym, trying to get yourself stronger, doing improper mechanics that led to injury. So give that a shot next time. Do a little self-assessment there, see if you're able to own that range of motion, getting as deep as you want to go, but keeping this against those 3 points. And if you can't do that, you can still do the move. It's best that you get your mobility first and go through that, but if you're adamant about putting that into your program, make sure that you can work the flexibility and then just keep the range of motion that you own and only work through that range of motion. So if you can only go halfway down, you only go halfway down. All right?